Hello there, and welcome to Forgotten Worlds. My name is Thomas, and tonight I'd like to invite you into a question that drifts softly through the silence of deep time. Settle in, let your thoughts slow, and imagine this with me. What if Earth has lived through not just one civilization, not even a handful, but countless civilizations, rising and falling over billions of years, their traces erased long before we ever arrived? What if the ground beneath your feet has carried endless worlds, entire histories, whole cultures that left behind nothing the present can recognize? It isn't a debate, it isn't a claim, it's simply a wondering, because when you stretch your mind across the age of the Earth 4.5 billion years, layer upon layer of stone and silence, it suddenly feels possible. Entire stories may have unfolded and ended, not once, but perhaps millions of times. And if they did, how would we ever know? The Earth is old, older than language, older than memory, older than the human sense of history, and it is restless. Its surface shifts, breaks, and renews itself. Mountains rise and crumble, oceans open and close. Forests burn, deserts drown, and even the continents themselves drift like slow ships across the mantle. Time does not preserve, it erases. So tonight, let's wander gently into that erasure. Let's imagine civilizations that might have come before ours swept away by tectonic plates, buried beneath oceans, dissolved into minerals and ash. Not myths or legends alone, but possibilities grounded in geology, archaeology, and the strange fragility of memory across deep time. And to begin, we need to understand the scale of time itself. Because before we can ask whether other civilizations existed, we have to grasp just how much room the Earth has had for their rise and their fall. Think for a moment about what you consider to be history. Perhaps the pyramids rising out of the desert 4,500 years ago. Perhaps the ancient stones of Stonehenge, aligned with the sun some 5,000 years ago. Or maybe even the painted caves of southern France, flickering with torchlight more than 30,000 years ago. These feel unimaginably distant. Already, they belong to worlds we can only visit through fragments, whispers, and reconstructions. And yet, if you laid those ages out along the span of Earth's life, they would not even fill the final tick of a clock. Human history, everything we call civilization, is less than the last second before midnight on a clock that began ticking 4.5 billion years ago. The age of the dinosaurs, too, which feels almost eternal in our imaginations, lasted about 165 million years. But even this reign, grand as it was, fills only a sliver of the vastness. The dinosaurs rose and fell within one long chapter, and before them were countless chapters still. This is the immensity of deep time. Not centuries, not millennia, not even millions of years, but billions. A number so large that the human brain resists it, stumbling as it tries to stretch across distances it cannot measure by memory. Imagine holding a strip of tape, stretching it across a room. Let's say the entire length represents Earth's history, 4.5 billion years, marked end to end. If you walk from one side of the room to the other, every step represents tens of millions of years. Somewhere near the very end, in the last centimeter of that tape, you would find all of recorded human history. That is how small we are against the background of time. And now, within that scale, imagine the possibilities. Civilizations need not last forever. Our own has barely lasted a few thousand years in recognizable form. What if others rose not for thousands, but for hundreds of thousands of years? What if they flowered for 1 million and then collapsed? Given 4.5 billion years, that leaves room for not just one or two, but perhaps millions of such cycles. The fossil record does not whisper of them. The rocks we read are selective, preserving chance remains, not deliberate diaries. But absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. And so the mind drifts. If civilizations had come and gone, one after another, how could we tell? Consider this. Life itself has been present on Earth for more than 3.5 billion years. For most of that time, it was microbial, invisible to the naked eye, busy in its slow chemistry. But in that long ocean of years, intelligence could have sparked again and again, perhaps not in the form of humans, or even mammals, but in some other guise, cephalopods with clever tentacles, reptiles that built in clay, beings with minds as sharp as ours, but so remote in time that all record of their presence has dissolved into dust. When we say civilization, we tend to imagine ourselves stone temples, bronze tools, languages carved into tablets, cities glittering under the sunday. But civilizations might not look like ours. They could have been entirely different, arising from different forms of intelligence, leaving behind different traces too fragile to endure. The sheer length of time ensures that if such civilizations existed, most of their records would already be erased. Let's pause here, close your eyes, if you like, and imagine a timeline so long it stretches out of sight. Along it are tiny sparks, moments when intelligence ignited, when beings gathered knowledge, when cultures formed. Each spark shines for a while, then fades, leaving the line empty again. And then, perhaps much later, another spark, then another, until finally, here we are, the latest glimmer at the very end of the strip. But who is to say we are the first spark, the only one? It is not a wild leap of imagination. Evolution experiments endlessly. Intelligence has evolved independently several times, even within our own record among cephalopods, among corvids, among mammals. On longer timescales, the odds tilt not against civilization, but toward it. And given billions of years, the possibility is not that Earth produced civilization only once, but that it may have done so many times, endlessly repeating, endlessly forgetting. Geology itself encourages this thought. For every layer we can read, there are countless others lost. For every fossil preserved, there are uncounted billions that vanished. What remains is less than a fraction of 1% of what once lived. Civilizations, if they existed, would fare no better. Their bones would crumble, their tools corrode, their monuments sink beneath oceans or grind beneath glaciers. Time erases, time recycles. The crust itself is consumed, drawn down into the mantle, and reborn as volcanic rock. So when we say billions of years, we are not talking about a span in which nothing happened. We are talking about a canvas large enough to hold civilizations rising and falling not once, but again and again, perhaps thousands of times, perhaps millions. A canvas so vast it makes human pride seem fragile. And this raises a deeper reflection. Perhaps civilization is not rare at all. Perhaps it is as natural to Earth as mountain building, as natural as rivers forming and eroding valleys. Perhaps every few 100 million years, when the conditions are right, intelligence blooms again, burns brightly, and then is swallowed by the same processes that eventually consume everything. You may feel a chill at that thought, not from fear, but from awe, because if that is true, then we are not an anomaly, not a singular miracle, but part of a pattern far larger than we can see. Think again of the strip of tape across the room. Think of how small we are at the edge. Now imagine lighting sparks all along its length, brief, bright, and gone. Imagine that behind us are not only the long ages of animals and plants we know, but civilizations forgotten, lives unrecorded, histories erased. It is humbling, isn't it, to imagine that we may not be the beginning, but simply the latest flicker in an endless procession. And yet, there is something strangely comforting in it as well, because if civilizations can rise again and again, then even should ours one day fall, perhaps life will try once more. Perhaps Earth is not stingy with intelligence, but generous, endlessly offering new chances. And so, the question becomes not only, what if there were civilizations before us, but also, what if there will be civilizations after us? Each one unknowing of the others, each one briefly believing itself to be the first and only. That is the true weight of deep time. It is not simply that it dwarfs human history, it is that it stretches so wide it can contain countless histories, countless forgotten worlds, all layered and lost beneath the restless skin of Earth. And this brings us to the problem of memory, because while time provides the room for civilizations to arise, the Earth itself is not a gentle archivist. It is a restless eraser, and before we can even speculate about civilizations erased, we must understand the processes that erase them. If time is the canvas upon which civilizations might appear, then Earth is the painter who never allows a picture to remain unaltered. It is not a still archive, carefully preserving each brushstroke. It is a restless artist, layering and relayering, scraping away old patterns, painting new ones on top. Beneath your feet at this very moment, that work is unfolding. The ground you walk on is not fixed. It is part of a vast, shifting puzzle. Earth's crust is broken into plates, enormous slabs of stone that drift slowly on the molten mantle below. They move at the speed of fingernails growing, but over millions of years, this is enough to tear continents apart, to crush them together, to raise mountains and bury oceans. Imagine a city, one that stood proud on some ancient coastline. Towers, statues, streets, homes, all carved into stone. For a few thousand years, perhaps, they endure. But then, tectonics begins its quiet work. A coastline sinks, a plate slides beneath another, sediment covers what once stood in the open air. Within a few million years, the city is gone, not ruined, not abandoned, but swallowed. Its stones are no longer stones at all. They have melted, folded into the crust, recycled into new mountains or islands thousands of kilometers away. This is the way of the Earth. It does not keep still. It recycles itself. Over and over, the crust is created and destroyed. Oceans open, then close. Continents drift, then fracture. Even the oldest rocks that we find are rare survivors, fragments of ancient cratons that manage to endure the cycle without being completely consumed. And erosion is no less merciless. Wind and water, slow and patient, grind mountains into sand, cliffs into dust. If you have ever watched waves gnaw at a shoreline, carving cliffs into arches and arches into rubble, you have seen the process in miniature. Multiply it across millions of years, and the most enduring monuments, whether natural or artificial, are reduced to grains carried by rivers to the sea. Volcanoes, too, play their part in the erasure. When mountains erupt, they do not only destroy what lies near them. They bury, they cover, they transform. Lava flows roll across valleys, sealing whatever was there beneath a molten tomb. Ash falls like snow, smothering landscapes in silence. And beneath the crust, subduction drags entire surfaces downward, folding ancient history into the deep mantle where no record survives. What this means is profound. On Earth, almost nothing survives deep time. We might imagine fossils as abundant, but they are vanishingly rare. For a creature to fossilize at all, it must be buried quickly in just the right conditions, then remain undisturbed for millions of years, and finally be exposed again where we can find it. Out of the billions of organisms that have lived, only a tiny fraction have left any trace. Now, imagine civilizations. Their monuments, their tools, their traces would be far more fragile than bone. Wood rots, metal corrodes, clay crumbles. Even stone buildings, which can seem eternal, are temporary on geological scales. The Colosseum in Rome, a marvel of durability, is not yet 2,000 years old, and already it crumbles. The pyramids, after just 4,500 years, are worn. their outer layers stripped away by wind and time. These are moments in the blink of an eye compared to millions of years. So consider a thought experiment. Let us say a civilization arose 50 million years ago. Perhaps it spread across continents. Perhaps it built in wood, stone, or even materials we no longer recognize. What would remain today? Almost nothing. Not because it collapsed, but because Earth itself erased it. Its cities might lie now beneath mountain ranges. Its artifacts might have been melted, crushed, or ground to dust. Even its bones, if they left any, would likely have dissolved. You and I might picture vast ruins, but geology tells us otherwise. Time on Earth is not gentle. It is active, violent, consuming. If you could peel back the crust, you would not find layers of intact cities stacked like pages in a book. You would find churned stone, remade and remade, the record endlessly rewritten. This is why the oldest direct evidence of life itself is scarce. Microbial mats leave chemical whispers in ancient rocks, but whole organisms from billions of years ago, they are gone. Entire ecosystems have lived and died, leaving little more than faint isotopic signatures in stone. If life itself, so abundant, so persistent, can be nearly erased, what chance would a fragile civilization have? There is a paradox here. We measure history by what remains, but what remains is almost nothing. The Earth, in its restless processes, has obliterated more than it has preserved. The fossil record, the geological record, even the archaeological record, they are fragments, scraps, lucky survivors of a system designed not to preserve, but to recycle. And so when we look for signs of past civilizations, we are not really asking if they existed. We are asking if they could have left traces strong enough to resist the greatest eraser we know, the Earth itself. To feel the weight of this picture standing on the rim of a canyon, you see the layers of stone stretching downward millions of years stacked in colors of red, gold, and gray. Each layer represents an ancient world, but it is a world in summary. It does not tell of every tree, every animal, every detail. It preserves only fragments. Imagine all that is missing. Now imagine that within one of those vanished worlds, a civilization once lived. How would you know? Could a single tool, a single anomaly in the soil, survive the erasure of so many ages? This is why scientists, when they consider the possibility of prior civilizations, speak not of monuments or artifacts, but of subtle signals, chemical shifts, isotopic traces, anomalies that resist erasure longer than stone or bone. Because everything else, the visible, the tangible, the grand, is too easily undone. Earth's surface is not a museum. It is a work in progress, always being revised. And that means civilizations may not vanish because they failed, but simply because geology does not permit their memory to remain. And this thought changes the question. It is not, did civilizations exist before us? But rather, if they did, could we ever know? Because the Earth does not keep memory as we do. It does not hold stories intact. It buries them, melts them, grinds them, scatters them. Civilization, however vast, however proud, is only a temporary arrangement of stone, metal, and thought upon a surface that is always moving. And in the end, the surface wins. Yet even knowing this, the question lingers, and perhaps grows heavier. If evidence cannot survive, then absence cannot prove. And in that absence, the imagination is free to wander. What if countless civilizations have come and gone, erased not by their own mistakes, but by the patient, relentless hand of the planet itself? It is here, in this tension between possibility and erasure, that the story of forgotten worlds truly begins. Because if Earth is capable of recycling entire ages, then civilizations may be as temporary as forests, as fragile as shorelines. And perhaps what we call permanence is only the illusion of standing briefly upon a surface that is always rewriting its own past. When we think of endings, we often imagine them as gradual, slow fades, gentle declines, civilizations slipping away over centuries. But Earth has endings of another kind, endings that arrive suddenly, sweeping across the planet with a force so vast that everything, from the smallest insect to the mightiest predator, is caught up in their reach. These are the mass extinctions, the moments when life itself is reset, the slate wiped nearly clean. Scientists speak of the Big Five, five catastrophic events in the last half-billion years that reshaped the course of evolution. They are known not just by their dates, but by their devastation. The Ordovician, the Devonian, the Permian, the Triassic, and the Cretaceous, each one marked by sudden loss, by ecosystems collapsing, by entire families of life disappearing forever. The Ordovician extinction, about 444 million years ago, came when the world shifted suddenly into ice. Vast glaciers spread, oceans receded, and nearly 85% of marine species perished. Imagine entire coastlines vanishing beneath sheets of ice, coral reefs shattering in the cold, creatures adapted to warmth finding themselves in waters too frigid to sustain them. If any complexity beyond the simple had begun to stir then, it was cut short, frozen away. The Devonian extinction followed roughly 370 million years ago, a drawn-out crisis lasting millions of years. Oceans, which had been lush with reef builders and fish, turned hostile. Oxygen fell. Waters stagnated. More than 3/4 of marine species disappeared, along with vast forests that once clothed the continents. If life had begun to experiment with higher intelligence in some hidden corner of the Devonian world, perhaps among armored fish or early land dwellers, that story would have ended before it could unfold. And then came the greatest of them all, the Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, the Great Dying. More than 90% of species vanished. Imagine that number for a moment, 9 of every 10 forms of life on Earth gone. The seas were emptied. The land was stripped. Volcanoes in what is now Siberia poured fire into the sky, releasing gases that suffocated the oceans, heated the air, and turned the very chemistry of the planet toxic. If ever a civilization had lived then, it would not have simply been destroyed. It would have been erased as though it had never been. No survivors, no ruins, just silence in the wake of fire. The Triassic extinction, around 201 million years ago, was another violent reset. Massive volcanic eruptions cracked apart the supercontinent of Pangaea, spewing carbon dioxide, heating the climate, and acidifying the oceans. Many reptilian groups were lost, their lineages severed before they could spread further. And yet, from that devastation came opportunity. The dinosaurs rose to dominance, filling the empty spaces left behind. Could it be that other forms of intelligence, too, might have been cut off at such thresholds, species poised on the brink of complexity, extinguished before they could take the next step? And finally, the most famous of them all, the Cretaceous extinction, 66 million years ago. An asteroid 6 miles wide struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing the energy of billions of atomic bombs. The impact fireballed the skies, shook the planet, darkened the world with ash. The great dinosaurs, after ruling for more than 150 million years, were gone in a geological instant. But in their absence, mammals, once small and hidden, surged into new roles, setting the stage for us. Here again, we see the pattern: destruction, then renewal. Civilizations, if they had existed, would have been wiped away just as surely as the dinosaurs, their memory lost in the roar of fire and flood. The pattern is sobering. Earth does not protect, it resets. It allows life to flourish, and then, in a single blow, it redraws the map. Forests vanish. Oceans change their chemistry. Continents split. Species that thrived for millions of years vanish overnight. If intelligence had risen in any of those ages, whether in forms familiar or strange, it would not have mattered. Mass extinctions do not discriminate. They sweep across the planet without regard for progress, culture, or thought. And this leads us into speculation, gentle but haunting. What if civilizations were born in these forgotten intervals, thriving in the warmth of stable climates, building, thinking, perhaps even dreaming? What if they were extinguished not because of their own collapse, but because of the planet's rhythm of catastrophe? Imagine for a moment a society of beings in the Devonian, living along the shores of ancient seas. Perhaps they wove tools from reeds, carved patterns into stone, mapped the stars above a sky unfamiliar to us. They survived for a time, even flourished. But then the oceans turned anoxic, the air grew unstable, and their world faded. No ruins would remain, no memory would endure. The ocean floor would recycle their traces into sediment, and that sediment into rock we would never know. Or picture the Permian, when life was diverse and strange. Perhaps among its ecosystems, some lineage reached for thought. Perhaps they spoke in ways we would not recognize. Perhaps they built communities, rituals, even philosophies. But then the great dying came. Fires raged, skies darkened, oceans suffocated. That civilization, if it had existed, would have ended not with decline but with obliteration. Nothing left but stone reshaped by heat. Even the Cretaceous, so familiar in our imagination with its towering reptiles, may have held surprises. 66 million years is a vast span of time, longer than the distance between now and the earliest human ancestors. Could something intelligent have arisen in that age, only to be erased in the firestorm of an asteroid's impact? We will never know. This is the unsettling gift of mass extinctions. They are reminders that permanence is an illusion, that survival is fragile, that even the most powerful are subject to erasure. They remind us that civilization, no matter how grand, is not protected from the rhythms of the earth and sky. But they also reveal something else: resilience. After each extinction, life returned. Not the same life, not the same forms, but new ones. Each reset was also a beginning. And perhaps that is why the idea of civilizations rising and falling endlessly feels so natural, because Earth itself follows that rhythm: destruction followed by renewal, endings followed by beginnings. When you look at the fossil record, what you are really seeing is a series of recoveries, each one written after a catastrophe. But in those blank spaces, those silences where species were erased, who can say what else may have lived and vanished? Civilizations may not just have been possible, they may have been inevitable, swept away like trilobites, ammonites, and dinosaurs. And so, when we consider our own place in this story, we see it differently. We are not outside the pattern, we are inside it, another experiment in intelligence, another flicker in the long rhythm of life. And as with all those that came before, our survival depends not only on what we build, but on forces far larger than ourselves: asteroids, volcanoes, climate, the restless processes of Earth. Mass extinctions are the ultimate reset buttons. They show us that even if civilizations bloom, they are always vulnerable to the sudden hand of the planet. Perhaps countless civilizations have already been written and erased in this way, their stories burned, drowned, or frozen, their traces folded back into stone. And perhaps, one day, ours will join them. 252 million years ago, the Earth shuddered through the darkest chapter in its long history. The Permian extinction, known simply as the Great Dying, was more than a catastrophe. It was an annihilation. 90% of all marine life vanished. More than 70% of creatures on land followed. Forests withered, oceans suffocated. The surface of the planet was transformed into something barely recognizable as the cradle of life. Scientists trace much of this devastation to fire beneath the ground. In what is now Siberia, titanic volcanic eruptions tore open the crust, releasing floods of lava that covered millions of square kilometers. Imagine standing on that land, a horizon glowing with molten rivers, skies choked with ash, the air heavy with toxic gases. The eruptions lasted not for days or months, but for hundreds of thousands of years. Carbon dioxide and methane poured into the atmosphere, heating the planet to extremes. Oceans warmed, oxygen levels plummeted, and vast regions turned anoxic dead zones where nothing could breathe. Picture a Permian shoreline before the crisis began. Strange forests of conifers and seed ferns stretched inland, their shadows falling on herds of reptiles unlike any alive today. Insects the size of hawks buzzed overhead, and in the shallows, armored fish glided through murky water. It was a world full of possibility, alive with lineages branching in unexpected directions. If ever there were room for a spark of intelligence beyond our own, this was one of those moments. A living Earth, diverse, dynamic, filled with niches where thought might arise. And yet, in the blink of geological time, it was gone. Entire families of life trilobites, once abundant for hundreds of millions of years, were erased forever. Coral reefs, which had flourished across the seas, collapsed and did not return for millions of years. The Permian reset the clock so completely that it took more than 10 million years for life to recover. If civilizations had emerged in that span before the Great Dying, they would have perished with everything else, leaving not even a trace in stone. That is the haunting lesson of the Permian. Even if intelligence had bloomed, even if civilizations had thrived, they could be obliterated so thoroughly that no sign would remain. The erasure was not selective. It did not care for complexity, culture, or progress. The very ground upon which they might have stood was remade, melted, and consumed. Civilization, no matter how advanced, would have been as fragile as any fern, any ammonite, any reptile that vanished into the silence. But the Permian also invites us to look deeper. If 90% of life was destroyed then, how many forgotten worlds could have existed before that? For the Permian was not the beginning. Life had already been experimenting for billions of years. Entire ages had passed, continents had risen and sunk, ecosystems had flourished and faded. Could civilizations have risen in those more ancient cycles, hidden in the vast stretches of time before the Great Dying, and been swept away? Not once, but many times. Consider this. The Cambrian explosion, more than 500 million years ago, unleashed an astonishing diversity of creatures. Complex forms appeared suddenly in the fossil record: trilobites with armored shells, predators with grasping limbs, early chordates that carried the first hints of backbones. This was a flowering of possibility, the kind of creative burst in which intelligence might have arisen in forms utterly unlike our own. Suppose one lineage had taken that step, building not with stone or fire, but with materials we would never recognize, substances long since dissolved. 10 mass extinctions later, what chance would their traces have? And what of times even older still? Before the Cambrian, before animals with shells and bones, there were eons where life thrived invisibly, microbial but restless, shaping the chemistry of the world. For nearly 3 billion years, bacteria and archaea dominated, forming mats, stromatolites, and colonies that altered the planet's atmosphere. Could some of those early lineages have taken paths we cannot imagine, paths that led not just to survival, but to something like society? If they did, their legacy would be microscopic, erased billions of years ago by tectonics, erosion, and endless cycles of burial and renewal. The The question lingers like a shadow at the edge of science. How many times might the Earth have carried civilizations before us? The Permian tells us they could vanish utterly, swept away in catastrophes so complete that the very crust is remade. And if that is so, then perhaps the story of intelligence on Earth is not a straight line leading to us, but a spiral rising again and again, only to be reset, lost, and begun anew. Think of it another way. If our civilization were to vanish today, every city abandoned, every artifact left to weather and crumble, how long would our memory last? A few thousand years and steel would rust, glass would shatter, concrete would collapse. 1,000,000 years and the continents themselves would shift. 100 million years and nothing would remain but subtle chemical whispers in the soil. 250 million years, and even those whispers might be gone. If we cannot imagine our own survival through deep time, how can we assume that no others have risen before us, erased by resets like the Great Dying? And yet, from that silence, new life always emerges. After the Permian, new lineages took root: archosaurs, early ancestors of crocodiles and birds, and the small reptiles that would one day give rise to mammals. Each extinction clears the board, but it also reshuffles the pieces. Perhaps civilizations, too, are reshuffled, each one a new experiment, each one temporary against the canvas of geological time. Here lies the humbling thought. The Permian and its ancient kin may not be exceptions. They may be part of a repeating rhythm, one in which life rises, civilizations spark, and catastrophes erase them, over and over. If so, then our own age is not unique. We are simply the most recent expression of a pattern as old as the Earth itself. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A world millions of years before the dinosaurs, filled with creatures no human has ever seen. In the forests, minds are stirring. They shape, they gather, they build. They live their span, perhaps for thousands of years, perhaps for millions. And then the earth shifts, the skies burn, the oceans suffocate. They are gone, their memory dissolved into stone. Their civilizations forgotten, not because they failed, but because the planet itself demands erasure. The Great Dying was not only the end of an age, it was a reminder of how fragile memory is when written on a planet that rewrites itself. And perhaps, behind it, there are countless other cycles we will never glimpse, each one erased, each one leaving us with nothing but questions. And that brings us to a haunting possibility. If civilizations can vanish so completely, then the absence of evidence is not certainty. It is simply silence. And silence, across billions of years, may hide more histories than we dare to imagine. In the early years of the 21st century, two NASA scientists, Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank, posed a question that startled even their colleagues. It was not a question about distant galaxies or alien civilizations orbiting other suns. It was far closer to home and far more unsettling. The question was this: if an industrial civilization had arisen on Earth millions of years before us, would we even know? They called it the Silurian hypothesis, borrowing the name not from geology but from science fiction. In an old episode of Doctor Who, reptilian beings known as Silurians were imagined as an intelligent race that once ruled the Earth, long before humans. The scientists chose the name with a touch of humor, but the question they asked was serious, grounded in the realities of geology and chemistry. And the answer they arrived at was humbling. No, we would not know, not with certainty. Think about our own civilization for a moment. If it ended tomorrow, if every city were abandoned, every factory silenced, every satellite left to fall, how long would its traces endure? A century later, glass towers would be shattered, their steel skeletons rusting. A few thousand years later, forests would reclaim streets, rivers would cut through highways, deserts would bury towns in dunes. A million years later, glaciers, erosion, and shifting tectonic plates would grind much of it into rubble. Within 10 million years, most evidence would be gone, and 10 million years is the blink of an eye in geological terms. Schmidt and Frank argued that if there were civilizations before us, industrial, energy-consuming, world-shaping civilizations, their most visible traces would vanish quickly. Skyscrapers, monuments, artifacts, even bones would not survive the slow recycling of Earth's crust. What would remain, however, would be subtler, chemical fingerprints written into the rocks themselves. Consider our own age. We burn fossil fuels, releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But the carbon we release is not the same as that found naturally. It carries a distinctive isotopic signature lighter, depleted in carbon-13 compared to carbon-12. That signal is already detectable in sediments being laid down today. Millions of years from now, if another intelligence were to study the rocks, they would find a spike in carbon isotopes and know that something unusual had happened. We also scatter other signals, plastics, synthetic compounds, radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing. Some of these may persist for thousands, even millions of years, though eventually even plastic degrades, and isotopes decay. But a faint residue, a thin layer in the strata of Earth's rocks, may remain. Future geologists, human or otherwise, could identify it as a marker of our brief industrial moment. And so, Schmidt and Frank asked, what if such markers already exist in older layers? What if spikes in carbon isotopes, unusual chemical anomalies, or sudden changes in climate preserved in stone are not merely natural events, but the echoes of past civilizations? It is a provocative thought, not meant as proof, but as an invitation to wonder. Because the geological record is full of strange events, brief warming spikes, sudden extinctions, rapid changes in carbon and oxygen levels. Most are explained as volcanic outbursts, asteroid impacts, or shifts in ocean chemistry. But could some, in theory, be the traces of a civilization like ours, long erased, known only by the faintest chemical scars? It is a dizzying speculation, because it shifts the way we think about evidence. We expect ruins, artifacts, fossils, but the Earth does not keep those. What it does keep, sometimes, are the chemical ripples of great events like fingerprints pressed into clay. If civilizations lived before us, their skyscrapers may be gone, but their atmosphere-altering industries might still echo in isotopic ratios, in strange deposits of metals, in anomalies we cannot easily explain. This is not to say that geologists secretly suspect lost civilizations. Most anomalies have plausible natural explanations, and extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. But the Silurian hypothesis asks us to think carefully. What would extraordinary evidence look like after 10, 50, or 100 million years? And if it is subtle, would we even recognize it? Think about the way we read the past today. A thin layer of iridium-rich clay found across the world marks the moment of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. That layer is only centimeters thick, but it is the echo of a catastrophe felt across the globe. What if somewhere else in the strata there lies another thin layer, another anomaly, not from asteroid or volcano, but from industry, an industry not ours, but belonging to some other forgotten age? Would we know to see it? Would we allow ourselves to wonder? There is another wrinkle. Civilizations may not have resembled ours. They may not have relied on fossil fuels. They may not have left plastics or concrete. They may have used energy sources that left subtler or stranger traces. Their technology may not even register as technology to us. It could have been biological, ephemeral, or woven into materials that decay entirely. If so, even the chemical whispers might be faint, buried, or misread. This is why Schmidt and Frank's thought experiment matters. It humbles us. It reminds us that the absence of evidence is not proof of absence. It tells us that in a world where rocks recycle, oceans rise, and continents drift, civilizations could come and go. And millions of years later, the record would show little more than a blip, a strange chemical layer that we shrug off as natural, not. And so the Silurian hypothesis does not claim that ancient civilizations existed. It simply asks whether we could tell if they had. And the sobering answer is, not easily, not with certainty, perhaps not at all. Close your eyes and picture the layers of rock beneath your feet, each one a page in Earth's story. Some are thick, some thin, some broken. Between them lie silences, eras where the record is missing, gaps where time has been erased. In those silences, civilizations might have lived and died. Their only legacy, perhaps, a slight anomaly in carbon, a thin layer of ash, a subtle shift in oxygen. Tiny marks on stone, easily overlooked, easily explained away. That is what Schmidt and Frank remind us of. That is what the Silurian hypothesis whispers. Civilizations may not only be forgotten, they may be invisible. And if that is true, then perhaps we must look differently at the Earth's past. Not only at fossils and bones, but at the hidden chemistry of stone. Not only at what is present, but at what is missing. Because in those absences, in those anomalies, may lie the only traces of worlds that came before us, worlds erased, yet still faintly echoing in the deep record of the Earth. When we imagine the future archaeologists of Earth, perhaps millions of years from now, we often picture them sifting through our ruins, crumbling skyscrapers, buried subway tunnels, forgotten satellites. But the sobering truth is this: most of what we have made will not survive. Time is not kind to monuments. The Earth is not an archive that carefully preserves what we build. It is a restless recycler, and it keeps only fragments. Take plastics, for example. In our age, they are everywhere, from bottles and bags to fibers in our clothing and fragments drifting in the sea. For a time, plastics seemed indestructible, icons of permanence. But they are not eternal. Sunlight, heat, and microbes break them down, first into smaller pieces, then into molecules. A few fragments may linger in sediments, tiny chemical ghosts of our age, but over millions of years, even those will dissolve. 100 million years from now, our plastic oceans may be nothing more than a faint chemical trace, indistinguishable from natural polymers. Concrete, too, feels solid. It forms the backbone of our cities, our bridges, our towers, and yet concrete is fragile against deep time. Water seeps in, freezes, and fractures it. Plants crack it apart. Within a few centuries of neglect, even the strongest structures crumble. Within tens of thousands of years, most will be dust. In 1,000,000 years, their grains will have joined the sediments of rivers and seas. And in 100 million years, they will be gone entirely, folded into stone, erased without ceremony. Even our most dangerous legacies, nuclear waste, buried in engineered vaults, will not endure forever. Radioactive isotopes decay, containers corrode. Given enough time, even these potent markers will blend back into the geology. The half-life of plutonium may seem long to us, but to the Earth, measured in billions of years, it is a fleeting moment. So when we ask what our civilization will leave behind, the answer is not cities, not monuments, not technology. It is at best a whisper, a thin chemical layer in the rocks, a blip in isotopic ratios, perhaps a scattering of unusual minerals. Our era, for all its scale and ambition, will compress into a band of stone no thicker than a sheet of paper. That is the archaeology of absence, the study not of what survives, but of what vanishes. And if this is true for us, it must also have been true for others. If civilizations rose before ours, their traces too would be gone. Their plastics, if they had them, would have degraded. Their concrete, if they built with it, would have crumbled. Their metals would have corroded, their glass shattered, their cities swallowed. They too would have been reduced to chemical whispers, thin anomalies in stone. Imagine, for a moment, that millions of years ago another species built a world of complexity. Perhaps they mastered energy, reshaped landscapes, left behind artifacts. Today, their ruins would not stand in deserts or forests. They would be gone. Their memory would lie only in the subtlest of signals hidden in stone, signals we might mistake for the byproducts of volcanoes or asteroids. Their world would be absent, not because it never was, but because the earth demands that absence. This thought changes the way we see ruins. When we stand among the remnants of ancient human civilizations, Machu Picchu, Angkor, Petra, we marvel at their survival. Yet these sites are only a few centuries or millennia old. They persist because they are young, because erosion has not yet undone them, because plate tectonics has not yet carried them away. Multiply the timescale by millions, and even these wonders vanish. The silence that follows is not an exception, it is the rule. It may be that the Earth's greatest archive is not its monuments, but its absences, the gaps in its story, the layers where something once was and is no longer. Perhaps civilizations leave their mark not in ruins, but in erasures. And perhaps those erasures are so thorough that we can never distinguish them from the natural silences of time. Still, some marks may remain, though faint. Synthetic compounds unknown in nature, unusual isotopic spikes, or rare mineral forms produced only by industry. And if they exist in the past, if buried deep in the strata we find unexplained anomalies, perhaps we should consider that they could be the legacies of civilizations, forgotten. But here is the deeper reflection. Even if we never find such signals, the absence itself does not prove that no civilizations came before. It only proves that the Earth is good at forgetting. The archaeology of absence is not about discovering ruins. It is about understanding why ruins do not remain. It is about realizing that civilizations, no matter how advanced, may leave almost nothing. And so we find ourselves in a paradox. The more we learn about the Earth's deep time, the more we realize how fragile our own memory will be. Our cities, our technologies, our very image of permanence, all of it will vanish. What will remain is silence. And in that silence, civilizations before us, if they existed, are indistinguishable from civilizations that never were. Close your eyes and picture the far future. Millions of years from now, geologists study the rocks of what was once your city. They find layers of sandstone, limestone, basalt, and then a thin, curious band, anomalous carbon, perhaps a few synthetic compounds. They note it, debate it, speculate about it. Was it volcanic? Was it meteorite-induced? Or was it something else, something stranger? They can never know for sure. Your civilization, your life, is reduced to a question mark in stone. That is the archaeology of absence. It tells us that civilizations may be erased not only from memory, but from matter itself. That absence is not emptiness, but possibility. That in the silence of the rocks, in the gaps of the fossil record, there may lie the faint shadows of worlds we will never know. Long before geology spoke of strata and isotopes, long before science began to measure time in billions of years, human cultures found their own ways of grappling with the mystery of cycles, rise, fall, rebirth. They did not use the language of chemistry or tectonics. They used story, and in those stories, they described worlds that came before ours, worlds that ended, and worlds yet to come. The Hindu tradition tells of the yugas, vast epochs that unfold in sequence, each one declining into disorder before giving way to the next. In this vision, time is not linear but cyclical, stretching across millions of years. Civilizations rise in the Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth, and fall into corruption in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, only to begin again. The pattern repeats endlessly. The yugas are not merely metaphors, they are calendars of cosmic memory, suggesting that the Earth has hosted countless civilizations before and will host countless more. The Mayan tradition speaks of the sun's 5 great ages, each one governed by a different element, each one ending in destruction. One world was consumed by fire, another swept away by wind, another drowned in floods. The present is only the latest sun, destined eventually to fall and be replaced. To the Maya, our civilization is not unique. It is one in a chain of worlds, fragile against the forces that shape them. In Greek mythology, Hesiod spoke of the ages of man. The Golden Age, when humans lived in harmony with the gods, gave way to the Silver Age, then the Bronze, then the Age of Heroes, and finally the Iron Age, the world of struggle and toil we inhabit now. Each age was not just a story, but a memory of something lost, a decline from greatness into impermanence. These myths, scattered across continents and cultures, share a strange resonance. They describe not a single creation, but many. Not one civilization, but endless cycles. Worlds born, worlds destroyed, worlds forgotten. And they suggest something profound. Perhaps humanity has always sensed that time is larger than our histories, that civilizations do not last forever, that what we see as permanence is only one chapter in a much longer book. When we read these myths through the lens of geology, they take on new dimensions. The yugas, measured in millions of years, echo the vastness of geological time. The sons of the Maya, each destroyed by catastrophe, mirror the mass extinctions that reshaped life again and again. The ages of man, with their decline from golden harmony to iron hardship, reflect the fragility of civilizations as they rise and fall. It is tempting to wonder, are these merely stories, or are they cultural memories, echoes, however distorted, of cycles too ancient for history to hold? Consider this. Oral traditions have preserved memories of volcanic eruptions, floods, and climate shifts for thousands of years. Indigenous peoples in Australia carry stories of coastlines drowned by rising seas more than 7,000 years ago. Myths are not always fantasy. Sometimes they are archives, encoded in story rather than stone. If human memory can stretch back that far, could it also carry traces of even older cycles, passed through dream and allegory from forgotten ages? It is here that myth and geology meet. The rock record shows us resets, catastrophes, cycles of life erased and reborn. Myth tells us the same story in another tongue: golden ages lost, worlds destroyed, civilizations wiped clean. One speaks in isotopes and lava flows, the other in gods and heroes. Both remind us that nothing endures. Both whisper of forgotten worlds. And perhaps myth fills a role science cannot. Science gives us evidence, precise but fragmentary. Myth gives us meaning, patterns woven across time. Where the fossil record is silent, myth gives voice. Where geology shows us absences, myth imagines what filled them. Together, they form a double vision, one rooted in stone, the other in story. Speculatively, we might ask, what if myths of forgotten ages are not only metaphor? What if they are echoes of deeper truths, faint cultural memories of civilizations erased not by their own collapse, but by the restless processes of the earth? Perhaps the yugas recall not abstract cycles but real ones. Perhaps the Mayan suns are distant memories of cataclysms, asteroids, floods, eruptions that reset the planet again and again. Perhaps Hesiod's ages of man remember not decline, but disappearance, the fading of civilizations whose traces the earth itself has hidden. Close your eyes and imagine sitting by a fire thousands of years ago, listening to an elder speak of a golden age when people lived in harmony, when the world was whole, when all was light. Then came the flood, the fire, the darkening. that world was lost, and ours began. You would not think of geology, you would not speak of isotopes, but you would know, deeply, that the earth has erased worlds before, and you would pass that knowledge down, not as science, but as story. This is why myths matter in the story of forgotten civilizations. They remind us that humans have always sensed the fragility of permanence, the inevitability of cycles. They remind us that absence can itself be memory, that what is gone may still echo in the tales we tell. So when we look at the Hindu yugas, the Mayan suns, the ages of man, we are not just reading stories. We are glimpsing humanity's attempt to grapple with the archaeology of absence. We are hearing, in metaphor, the same truth that geology whispers. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and the earth keeps little of their memory. And perhaps, if civilizations rose before ours, their only surviving trace is this: the myths of endless cycles, the dreamlike sense that we are not the first, nor the last, but one flicker in an eternal return. When we speak of forgotten civilizations, one name rises again and again from the sea of human imagination: Atlantis. First mentioned by Plato in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis was described as a powerful island nation, rich and advanced, that fell into corruption and was destroyed in a single day and night of floods and earthquakes. For millennia, the story has lingered, its details debated, its meaning reinterpreted. Was it allegory, a moral tale about hubris and decline? Or was it memory, a fragment of something the earth itself erased? Atlantis is not alone in this role. Across the world, cultures tell of vanished lands and drowned continents. Lemuria, once imagined by 19th century mystics as a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, was said to have been home to an ancient people who disappeared beneath the waves. Hyperborea, in Greek legend, lay far to the north, a land of eternal spring, inhabited by a race of wise and long-lived beings. And in countless indigenous traditions, there are stories of lands swallowed by water, islands lost to rising seas, cities buried beneath lakes and coasts. These myths may be symbolic, allegories of human frailty and the power of nature, but they may also be cultural memories, echoes of real events. After the last ice age, sea levels rose more than 100 meters, drowning vast tracts of land. Coastlines shifted dramatically. Regions that once held forests, rivers, and human settlements were swallowed by the ocean. The Black Sea flood, the submersion of Doggerland between Britain and Europe, the inundation of Sunda in Southeast Asia, all left scars in memory, passed down as stories of lost lands. Perhaps Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, and their siblings are not inventions but recollections, retellings of places that truly were, though transformed in the telling. But what if these myths point to something deeper still? What if they are not only memories of human lands lost after the Ice Age, but faint reflections of far older era shores, civilizations wiped away not by rising seas alone, but by the greater machinery of geology? In this light, Atlantis becomes less a place and more a symbol, the archetype of civilizations that rise, shine, and vanish, leaving little behind but stories. Consider how quickly the earth can erase. A city swallowed by the sea does not remain intact. Its wood decays, its metal corrodes, its stone crumbles. Within a few thousand years, the site may be buried in silt, its features obscured. Within 1,000,000 years, tectonics may have shifted the seafloor, burying it beyond recognition. Atlantis may not be unique. It may simply be the most enduring name for something that has happened countless times before. Many Atlantises may have existed, each erased, each remembered only in shadow. The fascination with lost continents reflects something universal in us, a sense that the Earth has carried more stories than the ones we know. Even when science dismisses the literal continents of Lemuria or Hyperborea, the myths remain powerful, because they embody the intuition that civilizations are fragile, that worlds can be swept away in an instant. They remind us that memory is not only preserved in stone, but in story, in longing, in the dreamlike sense that we are not the beginning. And here is where speculation stirs most strongly. What if Atlantis was real not in the way Plato described it, but in another way? What if his story, written down in Greece 2,000 years ago, was itself the echo of an echo, a fragment carried forward from time so distant that all else was lost? If a civilization existed 100 million years ago, erased by tectonics, volcanoes, or extinction, what would remain of it? Nothing in stone, perhaps, nothing in fossil, but maybe something in myth, a faint cultural inheritance, woven into story, distorted across generations, yet still carrying the shape of a forgotten truth. It may sound impossible, and yet memory has strange endurance. Indigenous stories in Australia have described coastlines drowned 7,000 years ago, their details verified by modern geology. Oral traditions in the Pacific recall volcanic eruptions, their timelines consistent with scientific dating. If memory can stretch thousands of years, perhaps under the right conditions it can stretch further, transformed, reframed, but not wholly erased. Perhaps myths like Atlantis and Lemuria are dreamlike fossils of civilizations erased not by collapse alone, but by the vast machinery of Earth. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine walking along a coastline. The sea stretches before you, calm and blue. But beneath the waves, hidden by time, lies a drowned world. Streets where people once walked, forests where animals once lived, fires where stories once were told. You cannot see them, but you sense them, like shadows beneath the water. That is the feeling myths like Atlantis give us, not evidence, but intuition. Not history, but the haunting sense of history's missing. Science tells us that continents drift, seas rise, worlds are erased. Myth tells us the same in another tongue. Lost lands, drowned cities, vanished peoples. Together they whisper that civilizations may not be singular, but cyclical. That Atlantis is not one place, but many. That Lemuria, Hyperborea, and other lost worlds are less about geography than about inevitability. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, and the Earth remembers little. What it does, remember, perhaps, we have preserved in the only archive that endures, the stories we tell. And so, Atlantis is not just a legend, it is a symbol of erasure itself. It is the name we give to the forgotten. It is the story we tell when we sense, deep down, that many worlds have come before ours, erased by time, leaving us only fragments of memory, carried like faint embers across generations, glowing in myth long after the fire has gone out. When we think of deep time, our imaginations often leap straight to the dinosaurs, towering sauropods, swift raptors, creatures that ruled the earth for more than 150 million years. But the age of dinosaurs is only one chapter, and not the first. Before them, across the Paleozoic era, life was already thriving, diverse, strange, and in many ways as alien to us as life on another world. The Paleozoic stretched from about 541 to 252 million years ago. For nearly 300 million years, Earth teemed with life in forms both familiar and unrecognizable. Oceans swarmed with trilobites, armored arthropods, whose ridged shells filled the seafloor. Coral reefs flourished. Early fish evolved jaws and teeth, testing new roles as predators. On land, plants rose from mosses to towering forests of ferns and seed-bearing trees. Insects grew to astonishing size, dragonflies with wingspans as wide as a hawk's. Amphibians crept from swamps onto land, and reptiles began their first experiments in survival. Close your eyes and imagine it. A coastline in the Devonian period, 400 million years ago. The air is thick with humidity, forests stretch inland, and strange fish-like creatures crawl onto muddy shores. Trilobites scuttle across tidal flats, their compound eyes scanning a world unfamiliar to ours. Cephalopods, ancient relatives of octopuses and squids, coil through the seas, some growing to lengths of several meters, their tentacles grasping prey in the dim light. It is not an empty world, it is alive, complex, full of evolutionary experiments. And here arises the speculative question: could intelligence have emerged then, long before the dinosaurs dominated the Earth? Could civilizations have flickered into existence in the Paleozoic, erased by time so thoroughly that we can barely imagine them now? Consider the trilobites. They endured for more than 270 million years, far longer than mammals have existed, longer even than the entire reign of the dinosaurs. Their eyes were sophisticated, built from calcite crystals, capable of complex vision. They filled countless ecological roles: scavengers, hunters, burrowers. In their persistence, in their adaptability, some paleontologists see the hallmarks of success. What if one lineage of trilobites pushed further toward intelligence? Their forms might have allowed tool use, social structures, perhaps even proto-civilizations. Or consider the cephalopods. Even today, their descendants, the octopus, the cuttlefish, display remarkable intelligence. They solve puzzles, use tools, remember patterns, and exhibit curiosity. Some biologists argue that their intelligence is rivaled only by that of primates, but cephalopods are not new. Their ancestors were already present hundreds of millions of years ago. Could ancient cephalopods in the dim Paleozoic seas have developed further? Could they have formed communities, developed communication, even experimented with technologies of their own, technologies now long dissolved in the ocean's churn? Speculation, yes, but the sheer length of time makes it worth wondering. If intelligence could emerge in mammals within a few million years after the dinosaurs' extinction, why not earlier, in trilobites or cephalopods, given hundreds of millions of years to experiment? Civilization, after all, is not tied to humans alone. It is tied to the capacity of minds to adapt, create, and collaborate. The challenge, of course, is evidence. The fossil record of the Paleozoic is rich in shells, teeth, and bones, but poor in behavior. Fossils tell us how creatures looked, not always how they thought. A trilobite's compound eye can be studied in exquisite detail, but whether that eye looked on a world of societies and tools, or simply of predators and prey, is something the rock cannot say. And here we return to the archaeology of absence. If a trilobite civilization had existed, what trace would remain? Their cities, if built of organic material, would have long since vanished. Their artifacts, if fashioned from shell or bone, would have dissolved. Their histories, if spoken or sung, would have left no fossil at all. All that would survive is stone, silent and incomplete. It is tempting, then, to imagine what such civilizations might have been like. Perhaps trilobites carved burrows not just as shelters, but as communal spaces. Perhaps they arranged shells or stones in patterns, rudimentary architecture lost to the tides. Perhaps cephalopods, with their grasping tentacles and problem-solving minds, cultivated reefs, tended resources, even mapped the seafloor with pigments and patterns that faded long ago. Of course, these are dreamlike speculations, whispers at the edge of plausibility, but they remind us that the Paleozoic was not barren. It was fertile ground for possibility. If civilizations are not unique to humans, if intelligence is a recurring experiment, then the Paleozoic had more than enough time and diversity to host its own forgotten worlds. And even if no civilizations arose then, the thought itself reveals something profound, that we judge the past by what survives, but survival is rare. Trilobites, cephalopods, amphibians, they lived and died in ages we can barely reconstruct. Their full stories are gone, and within that silence lies the possibility that civilizations may have come before us, erased not because they failed, but because the earth itself does not keep memory for long. So the Paleozoic invites us to humility. It reminds us that humans are not the inevitable end of evolution, but one more experiment among many. It reminds us that life has been complex for hundreds of millions of years, and that intelligence, if it has flickered before, may be older than we dare to imagine. Picture again that Devonian shoreline. The forests are thick, the seas alive, the sky buzzing with giant insects. Somewhere in that world, perhaps, a spark of intelligence glows. It does not endure. It leaves no monuments, no fossils, no memory. But it was there, however briefly, a forgotten world swallowed by time. 66 million years ago, the Earth fell into shadow. An asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing more energy than every nuclear weapon ever built. Forests burned, skies darkened, oceans boiled with acid rain. The great reptiles that had dominated for more than 150 million years were gone in the span of a geological heartbeat. And then, silence. But silence on Earth never lasts. In the ashes of the Cretaceous, mammals began to rise. Once small, nocturnal, and cautious, they diversified rapidly, filling the empty niches left behind. Insects buzzed through renewed forests. Birds, themselves survivors of the dinosaurs, spread their wings across the skies. Within a few million years, ecosystems flourished once again. Now pause here. Between that extinction event and the appearance of modern humans stretches a gulf of 65 million years. That span of time is difficult to comprehend. It is more than 10 times the distance between us and the earliest stone tools. It is a length of time vast enough for entire worlds to have risen and fallen, for civilizations to appear, thrive, and vanish without leaving a trace. When we think of our epoch, we often imagine ourselves as the inevitable outcome, the destined inheritors of the earth. But what if we are not the first? What if, in those long, empty-seeming millions of years, intelligence flared again and again, each time erased by the same forces that erase so much of Earth's memory? Imagine a civilization of mammals evolving 20 million years after the asteroid. Perhaps they resembled raccoons or primates, their dexterous hands shaping tools from stone or wood. Perhaps they developed fire, language, communities. They might have thrived for 1,000,000 years, long enough to build cultures, long enough to leave traces. But 1,000,000 years is nothing against the patience of erosion. Their tools would have crumbled, their bones dissolved, their stories forgotten. Or imagine a civilization of birds, descendants of the dinosaurs, inheritors of flight and song. Corvids today show intelligence rivaling that of young children. They use tools, remember faces, solve puzzles. Given millions of years, could their ancestors have gone further, forming societies of their own? Perhaps they built not with stone but with materials as fragile as feathers and twigs, materials never meant to survive deep time. Their cities may have been nests spanning entire forests, their art patterns traced in migration routes across the sky. All gone now, erased without ceremony. Even the oceans could have hosted civilizations in this span. Dolphins and whales display intelligence, communication, and culture. Their ancestors have swum Earth's waters for tens of millions of years. Could one lineage, long before us, have crossed the threshold into something more? A marine civilization, leaving behind not pyramids but patterns, not monuments but echoes in song. What trace would survive of such a people if their entire world was water? None that we would easily recognize. The 65 million years between dinosaurs and humans are not a void. They are an ocean of time, and in oceans, much can be hidden. If civilizations existed then, They may have been erased not by collapse alone, but by the simple workings of the earth. The forests that held them turned to coal. The rivers that carried them buried their artifacts in mud. The shifting continents carried their lands into the mantle, recycling them into new stone. And here lies the haunting thought. Perhaps we are not the first of our epoch. Perhaps we are simply the latest. Civilizations may rise again and again within the same age, separated not by billions of years, but by millions. Each one believing itself to be the beginning, each one destined to be forgotten. Think of how little survives even from our own ancestors. The first cities, built only 10,000 years ago, are already fragile ruins. The first tools, carved 2.5 million years ago, survive only because they were made of stone. In another million years, even these traces may be gone. Multiply the difficulty by 65 million, and the silence of the record is no surprise. And yet, silence is not emptiness. The geological record is dotted with anomalies, carbon spikes, sudden warming events, unexplained die-offs. Most are explained as volcanic or climatic. But what if a few are the faint echoes of civilizations we cannot recognize? What if some of those blips are not only natural disasters, but the scars of forgotten industry, erased so thoroughly that only their chemical shadows remain? Close your eyes and imagine walking across a plain 50 million years ago. Strange mammals roam, hooved creatures, small primates, predators with saber-like teeth. In the distance, perhaps, smoke rises. Not from a volcano, but from fire tended by hands no longer remembered. For a time, life thrives there. Then the earth shifts, climates change, and everything dissolves into silence. Millions of years later, we arrive, unaware that we are walking on the ruins of a world erased. Speculation, yes, but speculation grounded in humility. 65 million years is more than enough time. Enough for civilizations to appear, vanish, and vanish again. Enough for the earth to recycle their every trace. Enough to remind us that we may not be the first, not even in this epoch. And so, when we look back at the time between the dinosaurs and us, we should not see it as empty space. We should see it as possibility. An expanse wide enough to hold not only the rise of mammals and birds, but perhaps the rise and fall of civilizations we will never know. When we picture Earth, we often imagine continents, mountains and forests, the familiar landscapes of land. But most of our planet is not land. 70% of Earth is ocean, a restless blue surface that hides more than it reveals. Beneath its waves lies a world far larger than any continent, vast enough to hold countless secrets. And the truth is, most of it remains unmapped, unexplored, unknown. We know the surface of Mars more clearly than the seafloor beneath our own feet. Satellite data gives us outlines of ridges and trenches, but the details, the valleys, the plateaus, the hidden basins are largely a mystery. If civilizations once lived in the oceans or on lands now drowned beneath them, their traces may still lie hidden, buried in silt, preserved in silence. The end of the last ice age offers a sobering example. Just 20,000 years ago, sea levels were over 100 meters lower than they are today. Vast tracts of land stretched where oceans now roll. Doggerland connected Britain to Europe, its forests home to human hunters and gatherers. Sunda linked the islands of Southeast Asia into a great peninsula. Beringia joined Asia to North America, a step that carried people and animals across continents. When the ice melted and the seas rose, these lands were drowned. Entire human habitats disappeared beneath the waves. And yet, that was only a geological moment ago. Multiply such changes across millions of years, and coastlines are erased again and again. Continents break, seas advance, islands vanish. Civilizations, if they lived along those shores or even built their lives in the shallow seas, would have been swallowed whole. Their ruins would be buried under sediments, their artifacts scattered, their memory dissolved. It is here that speculation begins to stir. Could advanced cultures have lived on lands now lost beneath the sea? Could civilizations, perhaps long before humanity, have built their worlds on coasts we no longer see, only to be drowned by rising waters or shifting tectonics? Imagine an ice age, not ours, but 1 million of years earlier. Along its lowered coasts, a civilization flourishes. Villages cluster at river mouths. Trade moves along shorelines. Communities rise, thrive, endure, and then, as the climate warms, the ice retreats. The seas rise. In a few thousand years, everything is gone. The ocean swallows fields, houses, monuments. What remains is buried in silt, inaccessible, erased from memory. Millions of years later, we stand above it, unaware that entire worlds lie beneath the waves. The oceans are not only erasers, they are also archives. Sediments accumulate slowly, layering stories grain by grain. But those stories are difficult to reach. The depths of the sea are hostile, dark, crushing. We drill, we dredge, we map, but only faintly. The vast majority of the seabed has never been studied. If civilizations left traces there, chemical anomalies, unusual structures, fossilized remains, they may still rest beneath kilometers of water, waiting unseen. Even now, hints of drowned worlds surface from time to time. Off the coast of India, structures lie beneath the Gulf of Kambat, debated as natural or human-made. In the Mediterranean, ruins like Pavlopetri, more than 5,000 years old, lie beneath shallow seas. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stepped structure, sparks controversy, natural formation or lost architecture. These examples are recent, within the span of human memory, but they remind us that the ocean conceals, and what it conceals is easily forgotten. Extend that forgetting across deep time, and the oceans become the greatest vault of absence. If civilizations existed millions of years ago, their graves would be here in the drowned coasts, the hidden trenches, the buried plains. We may never touch them. We may never know. There is also another possibility. Civilizations may not have lived beside the oceans, but within them. Life in the sea has always been rich, intelligent, adaptive. Cephalopods, dolphins, whales, these beings display problem-solving, communication, even culture. Could earlier lineages, in ages long past, have crossed the threshold into civilization? If they built their worlds in the sea, their materials would have been organic, ephemeral, unpreserved. Their cities may have been coral reefs cultivated into shapes and forms now indistinguishable from natural growth. Their tools may have been shells, pigments, or signals carried by sound, none of which would survive millions of years. Imagine a civilization of cephalopods 50 million years ago, shaping the ocean, not with stone but with patterns of light and pigment, communicating in colors and gestures, storing memory not in writing but in lineage and song. Their world ends not with collapse but with slow extinction, their traces absorbed into the reefs, their legacy lost to the churn of the sea. Today, we might never guess they were there. The oceans remind us of two truths. First, that land is temporary, coastlines shift, islands sink, seas rise. Second, that absence does not mean emptiness. Beneath the waves may lie not only geology, but history, histories erased by water, civilizations drowned, cultures buried in silence. Close your eyes and imagine the ocean not as emptiness, but as a library with most of its shelves locked. We stand on the shore, peering in, but we cannot yet read its stories. Perhaps someday we will. Perhaps one day, with new tools and deeper exploration, we will uncover hints of civilizations erased beneath the tides. Until then, the ocean holds its secrets, keeping them from us as it has kept them from all who came before. And that is the haunting possibility, that our planet may have carried not only civilizations of land, but civilizations of water, erased and drowned, their memory preserved only in myth and imagination. Many Atlantises may lie hidden beneath the sea, not one, not a few, but countless, erased by time, waiting silently in the deep. If the oceans are Earth's greatest eraser, they are also its most impenetrable archive. Their surface is familiar waves, tides, the shimmer of light on blue water, but beneath, the world transforms into something alien. Pressure mounts, light vanishes, and silence deepens until only strange, adapted forms can endure. At their deepest, the oceans plunge into trenches more than 11 kilometers down, such as the Mariana Trench in the Pacific. These are places so remote, so hostile, that human exploration has barely touched them. Only a handful of crewed missions have ever descended to those depths. The rest is known to us only through sonar and scattered glimpses, faint sketches of a vast unknown. Imagine, for a moment, a civilization vanishing into such depths, not drowned by accident, but by intention, choosing to build where land could not follow, in the plateaus and ridges of the abyssal plain. Their cities might have been fashioned from materials resistant to pressure, their lives adapted to darkness. Over time, those cities would collapse, buried by sediments, consumed by tectonic churn. Today, we might pass over them in a ship, unaware that ruins lie kilometers below, sealed away in silence. The abyssal plains are among the flattest regions on Earth, covered with fine layers of sediment that settle over millions of years. They act like blankets, concealing anything beneath. If civilizations once touched those depths, their remains are now entombed, unreachable without drilling, invisible to casual exploration. The ocean, in this sense, is both tomb and time capsule, preserving while concealing. But preservation in the deep is fragile. Hydrothermal vents gush heat and minerals, reshaping the seabed. Subduction zones pull whole sections of crust downward, recycling them into the mantle. Volcanoes erupt, burying landscapes in lava that hardens into new crust. Even in the abyss, the Earth does not stand still. Over millions of years, even the most enduring traces are erased. And yet, in the imagination, we can linger there. Picture an ancient plateau, millions of years ago, rising from the mid-ocean ridge. Around it, a civilization takes root, beings adapted to darkness, glowing softly with bioluminescence, shaping their environment with patterns of light. Their architecture might not be stone, but coral-like growths, guided and cultivated into forms. Their communication might not be words, but pulses of color, rhythms of sound carried by water. For a time, they flourish, hidden from the surface world. Then, as the ridge shifts, the plateau subsides, their world sinks. Within geological minutes, it is buried beneath sediment, erased not by failure but by the deep rhythms of the earth. This is not fantasy so much as humility, because in truth, we do not know what the deep ocean holds. We have mapped only fragments. Entire mountain ranges lie unseen beneath the waves. Volcanic plateaus larger than continents rise and fall without notice. Trenches scar the crust, deeper than the highest mountains are tall. If civilizations ever lived there, their ruins could lie undisturbed, invisible to us, erased not by neglect, but by inaccessibility. The deep sea teaches us something about absence. What we cannot see, we often assume is empty. But emptiness is not the same as nothingness. The abyss is alive with organisms that glow, fish that withstand crushing pressures, microbes that thrive in boiling vents. If life can thrive there, intelligence could too. And if intelligence can, then perhaps civilization is not limited to the surface world at all. Yet here lies the paradox. The very environment that hides civilizations so effectively also prevents us from ever recovering them. The ocean is both eraser and archive. It conceals as it preserves, buries as it records. Its sediment may hold echoes of ancient worlds, but we may never reach them. To search the abyss is to confront the limits of human exploration, the recognition that most of our planet remains outside our grasp. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine drifting down through the water, past the last shimmer of sunlight, into the twilight zone, then deeper still into blackness. Around you, strange forms flicker with light: jellyfish, squid, lanternfish. You keep descending, past pressure that would crush steel, until you reach the seafloor. There, in the silence, you see shapes half buried in silt, patterns that might be natural or might be the remnants of something more. You reach for them, but the silt stirs, and in an instant they vanish, swallowed back into the abyss. That is the nature of the deep ocean. It shows us only glimpses, never certainties, and so we are left to wonder, could civilizations have vanished in the abyss, never to be recovered? Could the oceans hold more than myth-real histories, layered beneath kilometers of silence? If they do, we may never know. The archaeology of the abyss is not a practice we can perform. It is a thought experiment, a reminder of how much of Earth lies hidden, and how easily civilizations can vanish into the unknown. The abyssal unknown humbles us. It tells us that our knowledge of Earth is partial, that what we call history may be only a fraction of what truly unfolded. It tells us that civilizations may rise, vanish, and be buried in the deepest trenches, their memory preserved only in silence. And it tells us that the ocean, vast and restless, is both eraser and archive, holding secrets we may never be able to read. If there is one truth the Earth reminds us of again and again, it is that life is restless. It does not sit still. It experiments, diverges, adapts, and transforms. Across billions of years, countless forms have come and gone, some simple, some elaborate, some astonishingly complex. And among those experiments, intelligence has not been a single, rare accident. It has appeared many times, in many guises, on many branches of the tree of life. Consider the cephalopods. Octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish are mollusks, more closely related to clams than to us, yet they display intelligence that rivals mammals. They solve puzzles, navigate mazes, use tools, and even show signs of individual personalities. In aquariums, octopuses have been known to escape their tanks, open jars, and remember solutions for months. Their nervous systems are decentralized, with neurons spread throughout their arms, allowing them to think with their limbs as much as with their brains. They are, in every sense, alien intelligences, proof that complex minds can emerge along very different evolutionary paths. Now turn to the birds. Corvids, crows, ravens, magpies have demonstrated tool use, problem solving, and social complexity. They recognize faces, hold grudges, and pass knowledge across generations. In one famous experiment, a crow bent a wire into a hook to retrieve food, an act of invention not taught but imagined. Parrots, too, exhibit advanced cognition. Some understand categories, numbers, even words. Their intelligence evolved independently of mammals, proof again that the spark of mind can ignite in multiple places. And, of course, there are the mammals. Primates like chimpanzees and bonobos use tools, learn languages of signs or symbols, and display empathy and culture. Dolphins communicate with whistles and clicks, show self-recognition in mirrors, and pass traditions across pods. Elephants mourn their dead, navigate vast landscapes, and remember watering holes for decades. Each of these is an intelligence in its own right, different from ours, but undeniably real. What this tells us is profound. Intelligence is not a singular fluke. It is a recurring theme. Given enough time, enough diversity, enough evolutionary experiments, minds emerge. They are not inevitable, but they are not impossibly rare either. Earth, it seems, is a factory for minds, producing them again and again across its history. Now stretch this truth across deep time. If intelligence has appeared multiple times in the last few tens of millions of years, how many more times might it have appeared in the hundreds of millions before? How many lineages, now lost, might have carried sparks of thought, of problem-solving, of creativity? How many civilizations might have risen briefly, built upon those sparks, and then been erased? Speculation grows heavier here. Perhaps trilobites, across their 270 million-year reign, developed intelligence unknown to us. Perhaps cephalopods, in ancient oceans, were once more than hunters. Perhaps they were architects of reefs, stewards of seas, builders of ephemeral worlds. Perhaps mammals before us, long before primates, rose to cultures now invisible in the record. Each possibility seems improbable on its own, but across billions of years, improbabilities multiply into likelihoods. Evolution, after all, does not stop at failure. When one path closes, another opens. When extinction clears the board, new experiments begin. The Cambrian explosion, the rise of reptiles, the dawn of mammals, each was a burst of creativity, life testing new strategies. Intelligence, it seems, is one of those strategies. Not the only one, not always the winning one, but one the Earth is willing to try again and again. And civilizations, if intelligence arises repeatedly, then civilizations are not singular either. They may be cycles, rising wherever minds gather, falling wherever the Earth demands. Civilization, in this view, is not a miracle, but a rhythm, one of the many ways the planet expresses itself across time. Close your eyes and imagine the Earth as a great workshop. Life is its craft, and intelligence one of its recurring designs. On one bench, a cephalopod mind unfolds, building tools from shells. On another, a bird learns to shape twigs, passing the skill to its young. On yet another, a mammal experiments with fire, turning night into day. Some of these experiments last, others vanish. But the workshop never closes. It keeps trying, over and over, across eons. And so, the presence of multiple intelligences today, cephalopods in the sea, corvids in the sky, elephants on land, suggests that civilizations too could emerge again and again, not just once, not just now, but in forgotten ages past and in ages yet to come. This thought humbles us. It tells us we are not unique. We are part of a pattern, not the end of one. We are not the pinnacle of evolution, but its latest experiment in a long series of experiments. And if that is true, then civilizations may be less extraordinary than we think. They may be as natural to the Earth as mountains, as rivers, as forests, brief, fragile, but inevitable in their recurrence. Speculatively, this opens an even more haunting possibility. If Earth is a factory for minds, then civilizations may be woven into its rhythm. Each one rises, believes itself the first, the only, the eternal. Each one falls, erased by time, leaving little trace, and each one is followed, eventually, by another. The pattern continues, not once, not twice, but endlessly. And perhaps that is the truest story of forgotten worlds. Not that civilizations are rare, but that they are common. Not that we are unique, but that we are part of an unbroken cycle. Civilizations may be sparks in the darkness, brief, bright, and gone, but the darkness is always ready for another spark. If Earth is a factory for minds, then civilizations are its recurring prototypes. Again and again, intelligence reaches upward, shaping the world around it, extending its influence beyond the limits of instinct. But the question lingers like an ache in the background. If civilizations are common, why do none endure? Why do we not see their traces, not even faintly across the vastness of time? Here enters the concept of the Great Filter, a sobering idea borrowed from discussions of extraterrestrial life. The filter suggests that at some stage, civilizations always fail. The reasons may vary: war, resource depletion, ecological collapse, external catastrophe, but the result is the same. Civilizations rise, they flourish for a while, and then they fall, unable to cross the threshold into permanence. On Earth, history already offers us microcosms of this pattern. Ancient human civilizations, Mesopotamia, the Maya, the Indus Valley grew, expanded, and eventually declined. Their ruins remind us of impermanence. Each collapse came from different causes: drought, invasion, economic strain, shifting trade routes. Yet the theme was shared. Complexity outstripped stability, and collapse followed. Scale that fragility across millions of years, and the Great Filter becomes an endless rhythm. Perhaps countless civilizations, human and non-human, have already tested the experiment of endurance, and all have failed. Perhaps collapse is not an accident, but a rule of life. Imagine a cephalopod civilization in an ancient ocean. For thousands of years, they flourish, mastering their environment, crafting tools from shells and coral. But eventually, resources dwindle. Competition intensifies, conflict arises, the ocean shifts, climates change, and their civilization falters. Within a few million years, their legacy is gone, their every trace erased. Or picture a civilization of mammals in the Eocene, 20 million years after the dinosaurs' fall. They develop language, communities, perhaps even technology. But then the Earth warms abruptly, climates shift, and ecosystems collapse. Their society cannot adapt quickly enough. They vanish. Within 10 million years, nothing remains but anomalies in stone, indistinguishable from natural cycles. And now we arrive at the speculative heart of the filter. Perhaps no civilization has ever endured long enough to escape the cycle. None have left the Earth, seeded themselves among the stars, or built legacies that can withstand geological time. Each one believes itself unique. Each one collapses. Each one is forgotten. The implications for us are humbling. We imagine ourselves as pioneers, on the cusp of permanence, launching satellites, probing space, preparing to leave the cradle of Earth. But the filter whispers that we may be no different from those who came before. Our industry, our technology, our expansion may be brief against the canvas of deep time. We may, like all others, collapse before we can endure. Consider the vulnerabilities, our dependence on finite resources, our fragile balance with climate, our capacity for conflict, sharpened by weapons of immense power, our reliance on technologies that both sustain and endanger us. These are not unique flaws, they may be universal. Any civilization that rises may face the same challenges, the same temptations, the same risks. And if the Great Filter always waits, then collapse may be inevitable. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the Earth as a stage. Civilizations appear one after another, stepping into the light. They sing their songs, they tell their stories, they shape their worlds, and then, as if on cue, the curtain falls, silence returns. The stage is cleared, waiting for the next performance. Each act is different, but the ending is always the same. The thought is heavy, but it carries a strange symmetry. It suggests that we are not alone in our fragility, that other civilizations have struggled, faltered, and vanished as we may one day do. That humanity is not a singular miracle, but part of an infinite sequence, a cycle that repeats endlessly, each time with different players, each time with the same conclusion. Yet even within this sobering vision, there is beauty. Because if civilizations are fleeting, they are also eternal in their recurrence. The earth keeps making them, again and again, like sparks in the darkness. Each spark is temporary, but the pattern is unbroken. Civilizations vanish, but civilization itself endures as a rhythm of the planet. This is the paradox of the great filter on repeat. It tells us we may not survive, that collapse may be written into the nature of complexity itself. But it also tells us that even if we fall, others will rise. The earth will not stop experimenting. Minds will return, civilizations will return, and the cycle will continue long after we are gone. And so, perhaps our story is not about escaping the cycle, but about recognizing our place within it. Perhaps the measure of our civilization is not whether we endure forever, but how we live while we burn. Perhaps our role is to shine brightly, to add our spark to the long chain of forgotten lights, to be part of the rhythm even if we cannot break it. If civilizations are sparks and the earth erases most of their light, then what, if anything, remains? Not the monuments, not the stories, not the artifacts. What survives deepest time are the faintest of signals, written not in architecture or language, but in stone and soil. To search for forgotten civilizations, we must stop looking for ruins and start looking for anomalies, strange chemical signatures, isotopic blips, subtle layers of disruption. The Earth remembers in chemistry. Consider the boundary between the Cretaceous and the Paleogene, 66 million years ago. Across the world, in rocks of that age, lies a thin layer of clay enriched in iridium, an element rare on Earth but abundant in asteroids. That layer is the fingerprint of catastrophe, the calling card of the asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. No bones or ruins are needed. The chemistry tells the story. So too might civilizations leave their traces in chemistry. When we burn fossil fuels, we alter the isotopic balance of the atmosphere. Carbon comes in several forms, or isotopes: carbon-12, carbon-13, and carbon-14. Plants prefer the lighter carbon-12. Over millions of years, fossil fuels accumulate with a distinctive isotopic signature, carbon depleted in carbon-13. When we release that carbon by burning coal, oil, and gas, we flood the atmosphere with light carbon, shifting the ratio. That shift is now detectable in sediments and ice cores. A million years from now, it will remain in the stone record, a blip of strange chemistry marking our time. Other markers will join it. Nitrogen from fertilizers, altering soils on a global scale. Synthetic compounds, plastics, pesticides, industrial chemicals scattered in sediments. Heavy metals concentrated in patterns not produced by natural processes. Even radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing, brief but potent, will linger in the record for thousands, perhaps millions of years. Geologists call this the Anthropocene, the proposed epoch in which human activity has become a force of geology. Its signature is global, undeniable. But here lies the haunting question. What if similar signatures lie buried in older rocks? What if ancient isotopic anomalies, unexplained chemical shifts, are not only the products of volcanoes or natural cycles, but the faint echoes of civilizations long erased? Already, the record shows strange events. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, 55 million years ago, saw a sudden spike in global temperatures, accompanied by a massive release of carbon. Its cause is debated: volcanic activity, methane hydrates, or other natural processes. But could it have been something else? An ancient civilization burning fuels, altering climate, leaving behind only a chemical whisper? Most scientists would dismiss the idea, and rightly so. Natural explanations are sufficient. Yet, the Silurian hypothesis reminds us to at least ask the question: if such anomalies could be signs of industry, would we even recognize them? The search for such anomalies is underway. though not with civilizations in mind. Geologists and paleoclimatologists sift through stone, drilling cores from ocean floors, sampling layers of ancient soils. They analyze isotopes, charting the rhythms of oxygen and carbon, tracing climate across millions of years. They look for sudden changes, spikes, or disruptions. In their data, they see extinctions, recoveries, cataclysms. But hidden among these may lie stories we have not yet learned to read. Consider plastics again. Most will degrade, but tiny fragments, microplastics, may persist in sediments, fossilized as peculiar inclusions. A geologist 10 million years from now might crack open a rock and find them, puzzled by their unnatural shape and composition. Consider nuclear isotopes. Most will decay, but some, like technetium-99 and plutonium-244, have half-lives long enough to outlast civilizations. They might remain as faint markers in stone, chemical fingerprints of an age otherwise erased. But the sobering truth is this: most signals fade, plastics break down, isotopes decay, sediments recycle. The Earth does not keep neat records, it overwrites them. And so, when we look back into deep time, what we see are fragments at best. A blip here, a spike there, a silence in between. Civilization, if it has happened before, may have left no more than that. Speculatively, this means we may already have brushed against the traces of forgotten civilizations without realizing it. A carbon spike dismissed as volcanic, an oxygen anomaly explained as climate change, a heavy metal concentration written off as natural. Each anomaly has its explanation, but explanations can be incomplete. What if, buried among them, lies the faint memory of a world that lived, thrived, and vanished millions of years before us? The thought is dizzying. It means that stone and soil are not just geology, but potential archives of forgotten history. They hold within them not only the story of life, but possibly the stories of civilizations erased so thoroughly that only chemical shadows remain. Close your eyes and imagine holding a core of rock drilled from the seafloor. Its layers stretch back tens of millions of years, each one a page in the Earth's diary. Most pages are ordinary sand, silt, clay. But here and there are anomalies. A dark band, a sudden shift, an unusual concentration. To most eyes, they are the signatures of volcanoes, impacts, or climate. But to others, they may be something more, a whisper of a world forgotten, a civilization reduced to chemistry. This is what it means to seek traces in stone and soil. It is not to uncover temples or tools, but to listen to the Earth's chemistry, to read its anomalies as questions. And the questions they ask are haunting. Are we alone in history, or are we just the latest to leave our blip in the stone? Not all searches for forgotten civilizations begin with isotopes and chemical signatures. Some begin with objects, things found where they should not be, things that do not seem to fit the chronology of human history. These are the so-called out-of-place artifacts, or UPARTs, relics that some claim are evidence of lost technologies, ancient knowledge, or even civilizations erased from memory. Mainstream archaeology treats most of these with skepticism, and often with good reason. Many UPARTs are misunderstandings, misidentifications, or outright hoaxes. Yet the fascination with them persists, not because they are always genuine, but because they embody something deeper, humanity's longing for origins older than the ones we are told. Take, for example, the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. At first glance, it seemed an anomaly, a complex device of gears and dials built more than 2,000 years ago, capable of predicting eclipses and tracking celestial movements. To modern eyes, it resembled a clock centuries ahead of its time. And while it has been explained within the bounds of Greek ingenuity, its very existence reminds us that technologies can be lost, forgotten, erased. If one such device can vanish from memory for millennia, what else might have been erased across millions of years? Other alleged OOPArts are more controversial. The so-called Baghdad battery clay jars with metal rods has been interpreted by some as an ancient electrical device, though most scholars view it as simple storage. The Piri Reis map of 1513, drawn by a Turkish admiral, has been claimed to depict Antarctica long before it was officially discovered, though evidence suggests it was based on known coastlines. These examples, whether misunderstood or embellished, reveal a human tendency to see in anomalies the possibility of deeper histories. And then there are the stranger claims. Metal spheres said to be found in Precambrian rock, carvings interpreted as depictions of aircraft, fossilized footprints beside dinosaur tracks. Most are explained away as natural formations, misinterpretations, or fabrications. Yet their persistence in popular imagination is telling. Even when dismissed, they capture attention because they speak to an underlying intuition that the Earth may be older, stranger, and more filled with forgotten stories than official history admits. Speculatively, one might ask, what if some OOPArts are real, not in the literal sense claimed, but as distorted echoes of genuine forgotten worlds? If civilizations have risen and fallen before us, erased by time, might a few fragments survive not intact, but out of place, unexplainable, slipping through the cracks of geology, a gear embedded in stone, a pattern carved in fossil, a material too refined for its age? Most would vanish, but perhaps 1 in a billion might remain, baffling us, dismissed as anomaly, hidden in plain sight. Even if no such artifacts exist, their stories reveal something profound about us. They show that humanity senses the possibility of deeper origins, that we are haunted by the idea that our story is not the first. The appeal of OOPArts lies not only in their mystery, but in the way they resonate with our intuition that civilizations may have come before us, erased but not entirely forgotten. And perhaps this longing itself is a kind of evidence. Myths, after all, preserve memories in story. OOPArts, whether real or not, preserve memories in imagination. They are not proof of lost civilizations, but they are proof that humanity dreams of them, yearns for them, believes in them. They remind us that the archaeology of absence is not only about what is found in stone, but about what is found in the human mind, the refusal to accept that our history begins and ends with us. Close your eyes and picture holding an object in your hand, a sphere, a shard, a fragment of metal. It feels ancient, impossibly so. It should not exist. And yet hear it island around you. Voices debate. Is it natural? Is it fraud? Is it memory? The answers blur, but the object itself remains, demanding attention, whispering that the past may be stranger than we imagine. This is the essence of OOPArts. They are not about certainty, they are about possibility. They remind us that history is fragile, that evidence is scarce, that the earth forgets. They remind us that civilizations may not leave monuments, but they may leave whispers, objects out of place, fragments out of time. And whether real or imagined, these whispers shape our story. They keep alive the haunting question, are we truly the first, or are we just the latest inheritors of a past we can no longer see? When we speak of civilizations, we instinctively imagine ourselves cities of stone and steel, monuments reaching skyward, tools of metal, fires burning in the night. But what if civilization is not limited to our form? What if, in forgotten ages, intelligence took shapes so different, so alien yet earthborn, that we would hardly recognize their worlds as civilizations at all? Life on Earth has never been uniform. It is inventive, diverse, endlessly experimental. Intelligence, as we have seen, is not confined to primates. Cephalopods, corvids, dolphins, elephants all carry sparks of complex cognition. Some solve puzzles, some use tools, some pass traditions, some grieve their dead. Each demonstrates that mind is not bound to one lineage. If minds can arise in many places, why not civilizations as well? Imagine, for instance, a cephalopod civilization, not in the shallow waters of today, but in the warm seas of the Cretaceous, or even earlier, with tentacles for manipulation and skin that shifts in color and pattern. They could have developed a form of writing, not on stone but on living bodies, messages carried in flashes of light, histories stored in displays of pigment. Their architecture might not be built of stone blocks, but of coral reefs guided into deliberate forms, or shells shaped and aligned across the seafloor. To us, it would look like nature. To them, it might have been cities, or, consider a civilization of birds. Their intelligence is already evident in crows and ravens, who fashion hooks from twigs and pass skills from one generation to another. Over millions of years, could one lineage of avians have risen further? Their buildings might not have been vertical towers, but vast woven structures, forests of interlaced branches stretching for kilometers. Their art might have been patterns of feathers, migration routes drawn in the sky, songs arranged into symphonies of flight. A bird civilization might have left no stone monuments at all, yet their world could have been as rich as ours. Mammals, too, might have given rise to civilizations beyond humanity. Dolphins live in societies of remarkable complexity. They teach, they play, they call each other by names, they pass traditions, cooperate in hunting, and even create new games spontaneously. What if, in an earlier epoch, their ancestors went further, forming civilizations entirely of sound and social memory? No artifacts, no ruins, no material record, but civilizations nonetheless. The ocean would have swallowed their histories, leaving no trace for us to find. We might even stretch further. Insects, though often dismissed, display collective intelligence in astonishing ways. Ants farm fungi, herd aphids, wage wars, and build cities that rival ours in scale when measured against their size. Termite mounds regulate temperature with natural ventilation more efficient than some human architecture. Bees communicate through dances, encoding maps in movement. These are not civilizations in the human sense, but they are organized, technological, adaptive. What if, in the deep past, insect lineages took the next step? What if they achieved a civilization of their own, ephemeral, delicate, built of organic matter that vanished without fossilizing? Would we ever know? The idea of civilizations beyond humanity is not only speculation about the past. It is also a thought experiment about what civilization truly means. Must it leave monuments? Must it shape stone and metal? Or could civilization be defined by memory, communication, cooperation, and imagination? If so, then civilizations could have flourished many times, in many forms, leaving almost nothing for geology to keep. The challenge is recognition. We are trained to see civilization in human terms: pyramids, cities, tools, writing. If another civilization built with coral, sang its histories, or wove its architecture from branches, we might not recognize it even if fragments survived. We might dismiss its traces as natural formations, ordinary fossils, or chance alignments. The absence of recognition may be as profound a barrier as the absence of evidence. Speculatively, this means that alien civilizations need not come from the stars. They may have come from the Earth itself, alien only in form, but not in origin. We share a planet with many minds today. Perhaps we once shared it with many civilizations as well, each rising and falling in its own time, each erased not because it failed, but because the Earth does not keep memory for long. Close your eyes and imagine a forest millions of years ago. Birds weave vast structures high in the canopy, entire networks of woven homes stretching across valleys. Their songs tell histories, Their feathers carry symbols, their migrations are maps. To us, it would look like wilderness. To them, it was civilization. Or imagine the seafloor in the Devonian, where cephalopods shape coral into deliberate patterns, communicate in color, and pass memory across generations. The ocean shifts, the corals dissolve, and all is lost. But for a time, it was real. This is the haunting possibility of civilizations beyond humanity. They remind us that civilization is not one thing, not one form, not one destiny. It is a pattern that life may find again and again, in shapes we cannot predict. We are not the only minds. We may not be the only civilization. We may only be the one that happens to remain for now. When we think of civilization, we imagine permanence, stone monuments, towers and walls, roads and tools that endure after their makers are gone. Yet this image may be narrow, bound by the limits of our own culture. What if civilizations have risen that left no stone behind? What if their worlds were biological, ephemeral, or even immaterial civilizations that flowered and faded without leaving ruins for us to find? Consider the possibility of biological civilizations. Life on Earth is already capable of extraordinary architecture using living materials. Termites build vast mounds with ventilation systems that rival human engineering. Coral polyps create reefs larger than cities, living structures visible from space. Trees grow into interwoven canopies, forming bridges and shelters without stone or steel. What if, in some forgotten age, intelligence harnessed biology fully, not as a resource, but as architecture itself? Their cities might have been forests grown into deliberate forms, reefs sculpted into intricate designs, landscapes cultivated into living art. When they were gone, the forests regrew, the reefs dissolved, the landscapes shifted. To us, nothing would remain. But for a time, their civilizations were alive. Now imagine ephemeral civilizations' cultures built not of stone, but of sound, light, or memory. Dolphins already shape their societies through song. Birds use flight patterns as communal language. What if an intelligence evolved to create civilizations entirely through performance? Their monuments might have been songs sung for generations, their records dances of light across the ocean, their histories carried in memory alone. When they vanished, so too did every trace. Civilization, in this model, would be as real as ours, but as fragile as breath. And then there are the most speculative models, civilizations not bound to matter at all. Energy-based societies may sound like science fiction, but they arise naturally when we consider the paths evolution might take. If life can arise in forms, we struggle to imagine beings of plasma in the hearts of stars, or networks of electrical impulses in planetary magnetic fields. Why not civilizations that are themselves energetic? On Earth, we already see hints of this in lightning, in the complex interactions of electromagnetic fields, in the living currents of the ocean and air. Could there have been epochs when life itself took the form of energy, leaving behind no ruins, no tools, nothing but the faintest ripples in physics? If so, their civilizations would be truly invisible to us, erased not by geology, but by their very nature. Speculatively, such civilizations may not even require technology as we understand it. Their tools could have been living organisms engineered to fulfill roles, their libraries encoded in DNA, their architecture grown rather than built. Or they may have used substrates that do not fossilize ice, water, gases, energies that do not endure. Their achievements might have been immense in their time, but to us, they would be indistinguishable from nature itself. This redefinition of civilization is humbling. It reminds us that our own model cities of stone, tools of metal, writing on clay or paper, is only one expression among many. We see it as permanent, yet even our ruins will not endure deep time. If civilizations rose that chose biology, ephemerality, or energy as their medium, their disappearance would be even more complete. And their absence in the fossil record would not mean they never existed. It would mean they left no ruins at all. Close your eyes and imagine a forest millions of years ago. But this forest is not wild. It is a city. Trees have been guided into archways, canopies woven into halls, vines shaped into bridges. Birds sing histories from branch to branch. At night, fireflies illuminate streets of light. It looks like wilderness, but it is civilization, a civilization of biology, one that leaves no stone. When it vanishes, the forest regrows, and the memory dissolves into nature. Or picture an ocean where dolphins create symphonies of sound, not for play but as the foundation of their culture. Their monuments are echoes, their histories are melodies, their architecture is the choreography of movement. They live, they flourish, and then they fade. No ruins remain, only silence. Or imagine even further, civilizations of energy, existing in forms we cannot comprehend, flickering through electromagnetic fields, weaving themselves from light and magnetism. They thrive for millions of years, then disperse. To us, their story is nothing but a blank, a silence we cannot even detect. Yet they, too, were real. The haunting truth is this: civilizations may not be defined by what survives. They may be defined by what does not. Our model of permanence blinds us to alternate models, where civilization is not stone but song, not metal but memory, not artifact but energy. And if such civilizations existed, they would be forever lost to us, not because they failed, but because they were never meant to endure in matter. Speculatively, this also means we cannot measure the rarity of civilizations by evidence alone. The absence of ruins may not mean absence of civilizations. It may simply mean they were ephemeral, their very essence vanishing as they passed. Civilization may be more common than we can ever prove, hidden in the silences where no stone was ever carved. And so, the idea of alternate civilizational models is both humbling and liberating. It tells us that our way is not the only way, that civilizations may have flowered across deep time in forms we cannot imagine, leaving nothing behind but silence. And it tells us that absence is not emptiness. Absence may be the legacy of civilizations that chose other paths, other materials, other dreams. What does it mean if we are not the first? The question lingers like an echo, unsettling yet strangely familiar. If civilizations have risen and fallen before us, whether of stone, coral, song, or energy, then humanity is not the originator. We are the inheritors. Our story is not the first page, but one chapter in a book that has been written and erased countless times. To imagine ourselves as the first is comforting. It places us at the center, the beginning, the pinnacle of Earth's history. It makes our achievements feel singular, our existence miraculous. But if we are not the first, that comfort falters. We are revealed instead as participants in a cycle, one among many, part of a pattern that stretches beyond memory. Our monuments are not unique. Our technologies are not unprecedented. Our rise is not inevitable. It is borrowed, temporary, fragile. And yet, there is a strange humility in this realization. To be the inheritor is not to be diminished. It is to recognize that the earth is vast, that time is deep, that we are woven into a fabric larger than ourselves. Forgotten civilizations, if they existed, do not reduce us, they expand us. They remind us that intelligence is not a solitary spark, but a flame the earth kindles again and again. In this view, our story becomes both smaller and greater. Smaller because it is not unique, greater because it is shared. We are not alone in the long rhythm of rise and fall. We are not a singular miracle, but part of an eternal chorus, voices rising and vanishing across time. civilization itself becomes a natural process, like erosion or volcanism, like forests blooming and burning. We are not separate from nature. We are one of its recurring expressions. Philosophically, this reframes the human condition. If we are not the first, then our task is not to imagine ourselves as originators, but as continuers. We inherit the earth not as a blank canvas, but as a palimpsest, its earlier writings erased but faintly echoing beneath ours. We are adding verses to a poem already begun, brushstrokes to a canvas painted and repainted across eons. The humility of this perspective does not lessen us, it connects us. It also demands responsibility. If we are one civilization among many, then we must ask, what will our chapter add to the book? Will we repeat the same mistakes, collapsing into silence as others may have? Or will we learn, adapt, and strive to leave something enduring, not monuments of stone, but wisdom, memory, continuity? The possibility of forgotten worlds makes our own choices more urgent. For if collapse is the rule, then survival must be the exception, and exceptions require effort. Close your eyes and imagine the Book of Civilizations. Its pages are stone and soil, oceans and skies. Some chapters are long, some short. Many are lost, their ink erased, their meaning gone. Yet the book is not empty. It carries patterns, rhythms, cadences. Into that book we are now writing our chapter. We cannot erase what came before, but we can choose how we write. We can choose whether our words will be bright and fleeting, or enduring enough to be remembered. The philosophy of forgotten worlds is not despair, it is perspective. It tells us that we are not the measure of all things, that our story is not the first, nor will it be the last. That civilizations may be sparks, but sparks are part of fire, and fire belongs to the earth, not to us. This perspective also offers comfort in another way. If civilizations have come before us, then we are not alone in history. Others have walked this path, struggled with questions of survival, dreamed of permanence, and faced the inevitability of loss. We are kin not only with other species, but with other civilizations unknown, invisible, forgotten, yet connected to us in the rhythm of rise and fall. Speculatively, it even invites us to imagine a dialogue across time, not in words or artifacts, but in patterns. Perhaps what we call myths are faint messages, cultural echoes carried forward. Perhaps what we call anomalies in stone are signatures left unintentionally, geological notes scribbled in the margins of the earth. Perhaps the very fragility of civilization is the message that nothing endures, that humility is required, that each chapter must be lived fully, even if it cannot last. And so, the philosophy of forgotten worlds whispers this truth. We are not the originators, we are the inheritors. Our story is not unique, but it is precious. It is not eternal, but it is part of eternity. We are one chapter in an endless book, and though the earth will one day close our page, the story itself will continue, written again and again. As long as life endures, across the world, in cultures separated by oceans and centuries, one theme appears again and again: the destruction of worlds and their rebirth. Floods, fires, storms, and shadows sweep away civilizations, leaving behind only survivors, fragments, and memory. Then the cycle begins anew. These myths are not identical, yet their resonance is unmistakable. They suggest that humanity has always sensed that history is not linear but circular, that civilizations rise and fall in endless succession, that ours is but one in a chain of forgotten worlds. The story of the flood is among the most universal. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes Utnapishtim, who built a vessel to survive a deluge that destroyed humanity. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah does the same, guided by divine warning. In Hindu tradition, Manu is saved from a cosmic flood by Vishnu in the form of a fish. In the Americas, the Hopi, the Maya, and many others tell of floods that ended earlier worlds. The details vary, but the rhythm is constant. Civilization destroyed, a few preserved, the world renewed. Fires, too, carry this motif. The Aztec tradition speaks of suns that ended in flames, each world consumed before the next arose. In Norse myth, Ragnarok foretells a fiery destruction, followed by renewal, a new earth rising from the sea, green and fertile once more. Even in Greek myth, fire is an agent of transformation, the punishment of Phaethon, who lost control of the sun chariot, scorching the world before being struck down. Other stories invoke darkness. The Polynesians tell of skies closing, stars vanishing, and light returning only after trials. In Egyptian myth, the sun god Ra journeys through night, confronting chaos before bringing dawn again. These myths, though symbolic, echo the rhythm of cycles: destruction, silence, rebirth. The question arises, are these stories merely allegories, metaphors for human fragility, moral lessons wrapped in cosmic scale, or are they something more? Could they be, in some distant way, cultural memories of real cycles? If civilizations have risen and fallen before us, their traces erased by geology, might their only surviving echo be in myth, carried forward not in stone but in story? Consider oral tradition. Indigenous peoples of Australia have preserved accounts of rising seas that date back more than 7,000 years. These stories, passed through generations, describe coastlines that geology later confirmed were drowned after the last ice age. Myths can preserve truth across astonishing spans of time. If they can carry memory for thousands of years, might some myths be distorted echoes of events millions of years old, filtered through countless retellings? This possibility transforms myth into something more than imagination. Myths may be dreamlike fossils, cultural imprints of cycles, too ancient for history, yet too profound to vanish entirely. Each retelling reshapes them, adds metaphor, layers meaning. But beneath, perhaps, lies memory of floods that drowned continents, fires that consumed worlds, shadows that ended civilizations. Close your eyes and imagine sitting at a fire thousands of years ago, listening to a story of a world before this one. The teller speaks of a golden age when people lived in harmony, when the world was whole. Then came destruction, water rising, fire falling, darkness covering all. A few survived, and from them the world was reborn. The story is not told as science, but as myth, as memory, as warning. And perhaps, deep beneath its layers, it carries an echo of something older still. Dreamlike is the word for these myths. They feel familiar and strange, both metaphor and memory. They blur the line between imagination and history. And in their repetition across cultures, they remind us that humanity has always sensed the cycles of rise and fall, always imagined that ours is not the first world, always carried the intuition of forgotten civilizations. Speculatively, we might see myths as the bridge between geology and memory. Geology shows us mass extinctions, resets, cycles written in stone. Myths tell of floods, fires, and darkness resets written in story. Together, they point to the same truth, that civilizations, whether human or other, are fragile, and that the earth itself is the stage on which cycles of creation and destruction endlessly play. In this light, myths are not simply allegories. They are echoes, faint, distorted, dreamlike, but echoes nonetheless of worlds that came before, worlds erased, worlds remembered not in ruins, but in the timeless voices of story. If myths are echoes of forgotten worlds spoken aloud, then dreams may be their whispers within. Each night, when we surrender to sleep, we enter a realm of symbols and archetypes, images that feel both deeply personal and strangely universal. We walk through cities that never existed, meet people we have never known, wander landscapes that feel familiar, though we have never seen them. What if these dreams are more than random firings of the brain? What if they are fragments of memory not our own, but humanity's? Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of shared archetypes that surfaces in myth, art, and dream. These archetypes recur across cultures: the flood, the hero, the mother, the destroyer, the rebirth. They seem to belong not to individuals, but to humanity as a whole. Could these recurring images be the residue of forgotten civilizations, carried not in artifacts but in memory woven into our very minds? Speculatively, perhaps sleep is the archive where history too fragile for stone is kept. If civilizations rose and fell before us, their stories erased from soil and fossil, could their essence linger in the unconscious? Passed not through ruins but through biology, encoded somehow in the patterns of thought, surfacing in dreams as images we cannot explain. A city of light glimpsed in slumber, a language we do not know yet somehow understand. A flood, a fire, a fall, recurring across dreams as if rehearsed for millennia. Close your eyes and recall a dream you once had, one that felt ancient, strange, larger than yourself. Perhaps you wandered through vast halls whose architecture was not human, yet it felt familiar. Perhaps you flew over oceans, watching lands sink beneath waves. Perhaps you spoke words in a tongue that vanished when you awoke. These dreams may be nothing but imagination. Yet what if they are also fragments, echoes of lives lived long before ours, carried through time in ways we do not understand? Anthropologists note that dream motifs often overlap with myth. Cultures that never contacted one another dream of floods, journeys through darkness, encounters with luminous beings, rebirth after catastrophe. The universality of these images suggests something deeper than coincidence. They may arise from shared human psychology, but they may also be remnants of older stories, forgotten by waking memory but alive in the dream. In this sense, dreams are the archaeology of the mind. Where stone erases, the psyche preserves. Where geology is silent, the unconscious whispers. Dreams do not offer certainty, but they offer resonance, patterns that feel older than the dreamer. They are a living archive, fragile, fleeting, yet endlessly renewed each night. Speculatively, perhaps dreams are the last sanctuary of forgotten civilizations. Their buildings may be gone, their tools dissolved, their stories erased. But fragments survive as archetypes, cycles of creation and destruction, journeys and returns, symbols of loss and renewal. Each time we sleep, we step into that archive, walking among echoes too faint for history but too enduring to vanish. This thought reshapes sleep itself. We often see it as rest, a pause from the waking world, but perhaps it is also connection, an immersion into the deep river of memory, carrying us not only into our personal past, but into the long, erased histories of humanity, and even beyond humanity, into the forgotten civilizations of Earth. Close your eyes again and imagine drifting into dream. You find yourself in a city lit not by fire but by bioluminescence, glowing softly from walls of coral. You do not know why it feels familiar, but it does. Or you stand on a high plateau, watching a sun that is not our sun set over lands that no longer exist. You wake, and the images dissolve, but their imprint lingers, haunting, as though you had visited a world erased millions of years ago. This is the possibility of dreams as carriers of lost memory. They are not proof, they are not evidence, but they are experience, direct, undeniable, and strangely universal. And in their patterns, their archetypes, their repetitions, they remind us of the possibility that we are not the first, that our dreams may be haunted by lives we have never lived, by worlds we will never know, by civilizations erased but not entirely forgotten. And so, sleep may be humanity's deepest archive, not of certainty, but of echoes. Not of history, but of memory older than history. Dreams may be the place where forgotten worlds still live, flickering through the unconscious, reminding us that the past is not gone, only hidden, waiting in silence to be dreamed again. The earth keeps its secrets well, its surface hides more than it reveals, and its memory is written in absences as much as in stone. Civilizations, whether ours or others long erased, may have risen and fallen without leaving a trace we can ever recover. Time folds them away, oceans bury them, geology rewrites them. What remains is silence, and in that silence, possibility. We may never know if ours is the first or simply the latest. We may never know if the stories of myth, the anomalies in stone, or the patterns in dream are the echoes of civilizations older than memory. But the question itself endures, fragile yet unshakable. Are we truly alone in history, or are we only one flicker among endless forgotten lights? Close your eyes and imagine waves breaking against ancient stone. Each one erases a little more, carrying away the names once carved there, names the earth itself has already forgotten. The tide rolls in, the tide rolls out, and with it, civilizations rise, vanish, and dissolve into the silence of deep time. And perhaps, in that silence, another spark is already waiting.